So I have the signup.html page open in live view, and this is the page we're going to insert a form in. Using the insert panel, we're going to switch from HTML now to form, and then we're going to use the form button to insert form fields into our section here. We're going to select the paragraph element. I'm going to click on it using the tag selector to select the entire element, and then click on form, select the after position, and then in the properties panel I'm going to type register in the form ID. So this is going to be a form for registration, and then in the action I'm going to type in mail to info@voices. So this is how you would add a email link for your action. So these forms are going to go directly to this email address. So if you wanted to go to your email address, you would type in mail to and then type in your email address, and make sure you have no spaces in there. Also, just keep in mind that when you do use a form, you would normally need to use a form processor, which a form processing script, which we're not going to do. In this case, we don't have that available to us, but most web hosts would have that accessible to you, or you could purchase a form processing script. But for what we're doing, we're not going to use that. So when you do receive the form in your email, it may just kind of look like gibberish, but just keep in mind that normally you would use a form processing script. And also, normally for forms, if you're going to be exchanging monies or credit card information or personal information, you wouldn't want it to go through to an email address. So this is just how we're going to do it for this project and for this exercise. So after we've typed in the action with the email address, we're going to keep everything else at default. And now we're going to switch to design view, and you can see this red frame for your content of the form. And if you don't see that, you can always go to view and go to visual aids and make sure that the invisible elements is toggled on. So for now, we're going to highlight this placeholder text and delete it. And we can look at the code here. We have the form ID. It's given the ID name register, which we just added here. The name is register. The method is post here with the email action. And then we're going to add a text field. So with your cursor in that form field, we're going to click on text to insert a text field, and then we can look in the code and see that a label has been added for the text field, and the input type is a text type, and the name is text field, and then the ID selector is also called text field. So using our properties menu down here, I'm going to change the name from text field to first name, and then I'm going to check the required options. So we want the user is required to type in their name if they're going to fill out this form here. Then we're going to change the field label text to first name. So you could either do it directly here on the page or in the code view. So I'm going to type in first name, and then I'm going to put my cursor after that text field, hit return, and then click on or select the text field again. And this time I'm going to change that to last name. And then I'm going to change the name in the properties menu here. And again, you can always have your split view so you can see what's happening in the code. So now the last name is added to that ID selector. And then we're going to create another paragraph after last name, and I'm going to select the email option under the form. And then once you do that, you can again look at the code. It's labeled for email, and the input type is email. And then I'm going to create a new paragraph after the email field. I'm going to go to the select button. So here we can have a kind of a drop-down select menu where the user can select from a list of options. So I'm going to highlight the select text and type in some custom text. Then using the Properties menu, I'm going to select that Select List option, and in the Properties panel I'm going to change the name to Source, and then click on List Values. So here we can add our list of options. If you click on the first space, you can automatically type it in. So our first option is going to be social media, and then hit Tab, and we just have to add a value to it. So we're just going to call that social, and then continue to hit Tab to go down the road to the next item. And we're just going to keep adding more list items. And then finally, the last one, we want to add the text select, so give some directional text there, and then you don't need to add a value to it. And what we can do after we type that in is go to the up arrow to move that text to the very top. Then we can click on OK. So now you can see that the select text is at the top with the listed items below it. And they're going to select that select text in the Properties menu. Now the select tag is a Boolean attribute, which means that it's automatically selected in the menu. So when the viewer opens that page up, that select text is going to appear. Then we're going to add a checkbox at the very top. So we're going to put the cursor right before the first name and hit return, and then add a checkbox. I'm going to scroll down my form list here to click on checkbox, and then I'm going to highlight the checkbox text and place some custom text. Then select the actual checkbox, and using the Properties panel, we're going to change the field name to agree, and then you can make it a required field if you want to. Then we're going to add a submit and reset button. So it's very important to have a submit button, otherwise there's no way that the user can submit the form. So make sure you don't leave that important step out. So I'm going to hit a return after the last line and go to my submit button. And then we can customize the submit button here. In the Properties panel, under the value, we're going to type in custom text. So whatever you type in, the value area is what's going to show up over that button. Then next to the right of it, we want to click on the reset button. So this is very helpful so that if the user makes a mistake or wants to change their answer, they can reset it and start over. So we can look at the code here for the input type, it's the reset button, and then we can also look at the code for the submit button. So here we've got the input type is a submit type, but then the value is the text that is actually going to show up over that button. Okay, then we're going to add some CSS to this form. So the form tag encloses the entire form here. So we've got the opening and then the closing tag here. And then the input tag identifies what each object of the form does. Different types of form objects are identified with the type attribute, whether it's a text or an email or a list or the submit or reset button. I'm going to switch to live view now so you can get a better view of our form. So our form is looking pretty good now. We've got some padding around it. We've got a checkbox. We've got our name and email text fields. We have a list and a submit button and a reset button. And now we're just going to do a little bit more formatting with CSS. Let's click to select the label for the checkbox field. So remember, we named this the agree, so that's why it's got this agree ID selector. And then if we look at the tag selector here, it also has the subpage content P. So if we go to CSS Designer, we can click on the current button, and that will show us all the selectors that are attributed to our current element. So here we've got the subpage content ID selector, and then the paragraph tag selector. So the current button only shows the selectors related to that current insertion point. So we want to select the P tag for this entire element. And then using the Properties panel under Format, we can select Heading 2. So that's going to format that particular paragraph to the Heading 2 style. Now that ID selector subpage content that was previously had the P tag, now you see the H2 tag that replaces it. We're going to turn off the current mode now and add a selector called Input. And hit Return and uncheck Show Set, and we're going to add a width of a percentage this time to 100%. Scroll down to the margins and select a bottom margin of 10 pixels, and then scroll all the way down and float to the left, and then I'm going to add a clear property and type in both. You can click on Show Set again to look at all the properties that we just added. The clear property defines that other floating content cannot wrap around this element. So it's going to be cleared of anything wrapping around it. And since we selected both sides, nothing's going to wrap around either side. You could also select clear right or clear left, and things could wrap around one side if you wanted to specify or format it that way. Now you can see when you select that input tag selector, everything is, since we set it to 100% for the width, so everything is filling up 100% of that element. And that on the buttons, we don't really want it to fill up 100%. So we're going to change that by adding another selector, and we're going to call this selector .NoClear. So for the no clear style, I'm going to uncheck Show Set, and the width is going to be auto this time rather than 100%, and the margin, the right margin is going to be 10 pixels, and then this time for the clear property, you want to select None. Select the checkbox and select the No Clear class selector, and so that overrides the input selector. The auto value allows the object to occupy only what space is necessary rather than that percentage of 100% in the input and label tag selectors. So now we want to add that No class selector to the bottom buttons. So you can select the class selector in your Properties panel, or you can add it here in Live View using the menu display right above it. Now we can look at the form in Live View, and you can go to View, Live View Options, and hide the Live View displays if you want to get rid of the guidelines and see a closer representation of how it will look in the browser. Now we're done formatting our form, and we can go ahead and save the files and export our files. So if we save this, we can go to Manage Sites, click on the Export button, and save the STE file in your root folder. And then once you've done that, you can export it. And then you will work on your homework 10 assignment and make sure that you submit that, including all your graphic links, any CSS files, in a compressed folder. When you submit your Solar Homework 10 file, make sure that you include all of your link files, CSS style sheets in a single folder and then as your root folder, and then you can compress that folder and submit it on As You Learn.